In the vast darkness between stars, there exists an unwritten law that even the most savage civilizations dare not break. Never harm those who heal. For 3,000 years, medical personnel have moved freely across battlefields, their Red Cross symbols recognized as sacred by every known species. They're the untouchables, the sanctuary builders, the ones who patch up enemies and friends alike without question or judgment. But the HFY Imperium didn't get the memo. When their warships descended upon the peaceful medical station orbiting Kepler 442b, they thought they were making a statement about human weakness. Instead, they awakened something that had been sleeping in the depths of human space. Something that would make them wish they had never learned what the symbol of a Red Cross truly meant to humanity. What they discovered was this: you can attack human soldiers, destroy human colonies, even glass human worlds. But touch those who were the healer's mark? That's when you learn why every other species in the galaxy whispers the same warning. Never corner a human with nothing left to lose. Dr. Sarah Chun had seen 3 wars, 2 plagues, and 1 galactic pandemic, but nothing had prepared her for the serenity of Medical Station Hippocrates. The facility orbited the garden world of Kepler 442b like a silver cross against the stars, its arms stretching out to embrace ships from across the galaxy. Here, in neutral space, species that had been killing each other for generations laid down their weapons and extended their limbs, tentacles, or whatever appendages they possessed for healing. The morning shift began like any other. Sarah walked through the corridors where the soft hum of medical equipment provided a comforting rhythm. The station housed 12,000 medical personnel from 47 different species, all united under the ancient oath of first, do no harm. It was humanity's gift to the galaxy, a place where politics ended and medicine began. Dr. Chun to the trauma bay came the announcement over the intercom. Sarah quickened her pace, her white coat flowing behind her. She had been the chief medical officer of Hippocrates for 8 years, ever since the Terran Medical Corps established the station as part of the Galactic Peace Accords. The position came with its challenges, but also with profound satisfaction. Here, she had saved the life of a Zephyrian ambassador whose species was at war with the human colonies of Proxima Centauri. She had delivered the first crystalline offspring born in space, despite never having studied their silicon-based biology. Each day brought new challenges, new species, and new opportunities to prove that healing transcended the boundaries of flesh, scales, or mineral formations. In the trauma bay, a team of mixed-species medical staff worked on a wounded Altarian fighter pilot whose ship had been damaged in a skirmish with pirates near the Vega system. Dr. Keth Moore, a reptilian surgeon whose species was known for their precision, worked alongside Nurse Martinez, a human whose steady hands had earned respect from beings whose anatomy differed wildly from her own. The sight always filled Sarah with pride. This was what the galaxy could be when beings chose cooperation over conflict. Pilot sustained multiple fractures to the wing membranes and internal bleeding in the secondary stomach. Dr. Kethmore reported, his scaled hands moving with practiced efficiency. The biofoam has stabilized the bleeding, but we need to realign the bone structure in the wings or flight capability will be permanently compromised. Sarah nodded, reviewing the holographic display of the Altarian's anatomy. Each species presented unique challenges, but the universal desire to live, to heal, to return to loved ones remained constant. Proceed with the wing reconstruction. I'll assist with the internal repairs. As they worked, Sarah's mind wandered to the recent reports from the frontier. The HFY Imperium had been expanding aggressively, annexing neutral systems and enslaving populations. Their military doctrine was brutal but effective, total warfare with no regard for civilian casualties or universal conventions. Yet even they had respected the neutrality of medical stations. The Red Cross symbol was recognized by every spacefaring civilization as inviolate, a beacon of sanctuary in an often cruel universe. The surgery took 4 hours. When they finally closed the patient, the Altarian's wings were perfectly aligned, and his vital signs had stabilized. Sarah watched as the pilot was moved to recovery, knowing that in 3 days he would be flying again, perhaps against the very pirates who had shot him down, or perhaps on a merchant run to the outer colonies. It didn't matter. Here, politics stopped at the airlock. Dr. Chun called Lieutenant Commander Williams, the station's military liaison. His presence was largely ceremonial, as the station maintained only minimal defensive capabilities, shields, basic sensors, and a small complement of security officers. The real protection came from the universal respect for the medical sanctuary laws. We're receiving some unusual scanner readings from the edge of the system. Sarah followed him to the command center, a modest facility that coordinated the station's operations and managed the constant flow of medical transports. The scanner operator, Ensign Park, looked troubled as she studied the displays. "It's a large formation," Dr. Park reported. "At least 40 ships, moving in a coordinated pattern. The signatures don't match any of the standard medical transport configurations, and they're not broadcasting the standard medical emergency codes." Sarah frowned. Large formations usually meant military vessels, but military ships rarely traveled together near medical stations unless they were escorting wounded, and the approach patterns seemed aggressive. "Have they responded to our identification broadcasts?" she asked. "Negative, Doctor. We've transmitted the standard medical station identification, neutral status confirmation, and offered emergency medical assistance." No response to any channel. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. In 8 years, she had never encountered a situation where ships approached the station without identifying themselves. The medical sanctuary laws were not suggestions. They were fundamental principles that had prevented the galaxy from descending into total barbarism. "Lieutenant Commander Williams, what's our standard protocol for unidentified ships?" Williams consulted his manual, though Sarah suspected he already knew the answer. "According to medical sanctuary regulations, we maintain our neutral status and continue offering medical assistance. If they have wounded, we treat them. If they don't, they should pass through our space without interference." The ships continued their approach. Sarah called for all department heads to report to the command center. Within minutes, representatives from each medical department had gathered. Humans, reptilians, crystallines, even the lone ethereal entity that served as their psychological counselor for energy-based life forms. Dr. Vex, the station's senior trauma surgeon and a member of the insectoid Chitruk species, clicked his mandibles nervously. "In my 70 years of medical service, I have never seen a military formation approach a medical station in this manner. The behavior is unprecedented." The ships were now close enough for detailed scans. The computer identified them as vessels of the Kethvar Imperium, their hulls bristling with weapons systems designed for planetary bombardment. These were not escort vessels or ships carrying wounded. These were warships configured for assault. "They're targeting our communications array," Ensign Park announced, her voice tight with disbelief. "All ships are locking weapons on the station." The command center fell silent. This couldn't be happening. The medical sanctuary laws had been respected for 3 millennia. They were written in the blood of billions of beings who had died in wars before the galaxy learned that some things were sacred. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm despite the racing of her heart. "Open a channel to the lead ship. All frequencies." "Channel open, Doctor." "This is Dr. Sarah Chun, Chief Medical Officer of Medical Station Hippocrates. We are a neutral medical facility operating under the protection of the Galactic Medical Sanctuary laws. We offer assistance to all species without regard to politics or conflict. Please identify your intentions and any medical emergencies we can assist with." The response came in the form of plasma bolts that struck the station's shields. Alarms blared throughout Hippocrates as the defensive barriers flared with energy, holding but weakening under the assault. "All ships are firing," Park shouted over the noise. "Shields down to 60%. Sarah stared at the tactical display in horror. They were actually attacking the station. A medical station. The impossible was happening before her eyes. Beings were violating the most fundamental law of galactic civilization. "Emergency protocols," she commanded. "All medical staff to emergency stations." Begin immediate evacuation of patients who can be moved. Seal all critical care units. The HFY ships continued their bombardment, their weapons systematically targeting the station's defensive systems and communications equipment. Sarah realized with growing horror that this was not random violence. It was a calculated attack designed to disable their ability to call for help while keeping the station intact enough for what? Her question was answered when the assault stopped and dozens of boarding pods launched from the HFY ships. They were coming aboard. Lieutenant Commander Williams, what are our options? Williams looked at his tactical display with the expression of a man watching his worst nightmare unfold. Doctor, we have 43 security officers armed with standard defensive weapons. They have over 300 assault troops. Our security force is designed to handle medical emergencies and maintain order among patients, not repel a military invasion. The first boarding pods struck the station's hull with metallic impacts that resonated through the corridors. Sarah could hear the cutting torches beginning to breach the outer bulkheads. All medical personnel, she announced over the station's intercom, we are under attack by unknown forces. This is a violation of medical sanctuary laws, but our first priority remains our patients. Protect those in your care. Follow emergency protocols. And remember, we are healers, not soldiers, but that doesn't mean we're helpless. The cutting stopped. Sarah could hear the hiss of atmosphere equalizing as the first boarding parties entered Hippocrates. The impossible was no longer impossible. It was happening. The HFY were massive humanoid beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick, armored hide that served as natural protection. They moved through the corridors of the medical station like a plague, their weapons raised and their intentions clear. They weren't here to receive medical treatment. They were here to destroy everything the station represented. Sarah watched from the command center as the security cameras showed HFY soldiers stunning medical staff and herding them into groups. They moved with military precision, but there was something else in their behavior, a deliberate cruelty that went beyond tactical necessity. They're not just occupying the station, Williams observed grimly. They're targeting medical personnel specifically. Look at the pattern of their movement. They're ignoring the patients and focusing on doctors and nurses. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. This wasn't just an attack on a medical station. It was an attack on the very concept of medical neutrality. The HFY were making a statement, demonstrating their contempt for the laws that kept galactic civilization from descending into total barbarism. Dr. Chun, came a voice from her personal communicator. It was Dr. Yara Okafor, the head of the pediatric wing. They've reached the children's ward. They're stunning the medical staff and leaving the children alone, but, Doctor, some of these patients need constant care. Without medical attention, the young ones from Epsilon Eridani will die within hours. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. 12,000 medical personnel, representing the finest healers from across the galaxy, and thousands of patients who depended on them for survival. All now at the mercy of beings who had chosen to violate the most sacred law in the galaxy. The command center door burst open as HFY soldiers entered, their massive forms filling the doorway. Their leader, identified by the ceremonial scars on his arms, stepped forward and looked at Sarah with eyes that held no compassion, no recognition of her humanity, only cold calculation. You are the one in charge of this facility, he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from the depths of his chest. I am Dr. Sarah Chun, Chief Medical Officer. This is a neutral medical facility protected by... The HFY leader struck her with the back of his hand, sending her sprawling across the floor. Blood trickled from her mouth as she struggled to her feet. Your laws mean nothing to the Imperium, he growled. Your weakness disgusts us. You heal our enemies and call it virtue. You tend to those who would destroy you and call it mercy. Today, you learn the price of such foolishness. Sarah stood, wiping blood from her lips, her white coat now stained red. Around the command center, her staff watched in horror as everything they had believed about galactic civilization crumbled before their eyes. What do you want? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "We want you to understand your place," the Keth Var commander replied. "You will serve the Imperium now. You will heal only those we designate. You will watch as we demonstrate the consequences of opposing our expansion." Sarah looked at the faces of her medical staff. Human, alien, all united in their shock and disbelief. These beings had dedicated their lives to healing, to preserving life regardless of species or politics. They had believed that their mission placed them beyond the reach of war and hatred. They had been wrong. But as Sarah met the eyes of her colleagues, she saw something else growing behind their fear, a cold, hard anger that she had never seen before in medical personnel. The Keth Var had crossed a line that should never have been crossed, violated a sacred trust that had held the galaxy together for millennia. They had attacked healers, and somewhere in the depths of space, automated distress beacons launched from the station's hidden emergency transmitters continued broadcasting a simple message into the void. Medical station under attack. Medical sanctuary violated. Assistance requested. The message would reach Earth in 6 hours. The response would follow in 6 days. And the Keth Var Imperium was about to learn why no species in the galaxy had ever been foolish enough to attack human medical personnel before. Admiral Marcus Kane stood before the massive holographic display in the Strategic Command Center of Earth's orbital defense platform, watching the automated distress signal play for the 7th time. The message was simple, clinical, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Medical station under attack. Medical sanctuary violated. Assistance requested. The silence in the command center was absolute. Around the curved walls, dozens of officers from every branch of the Terran Defense Forces stood frozen, their faces reflecting the same mixture of disbelief and growing rage that Kane felt building in his chest. In 3 decades of military service, he had never seen anything that violated the fundamental laws of civilized warfare so completely. "Confirm the signal origin," Kane ordered, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Signal confirmed from Medical Station Hippocrates, Kepler 442 system," reported Commander Lisa Park, the Chief Communications Officer. "Automated distress beacon, transmitted on all emergency frequencies. Signal degradation suggests the beacon was damaged during transmission, but the core message is clear." Kane turned to the intelligence briefing station where Colonel Sarah Martinez was pulling up everything they knew about the Keth Var Imperium. The holographic displays showed star charts, fleet compositions, and tactical assessments that painted a picture of an aggressive expansionist power that had been steadily growing bolder in recent months. "What do we know about their recent activities?" Kane asked. Martinez highlighted several star systems on the tactical display. "Intelligence reports indicate they've annexed 4 neutral systems in the past 6 months. Their doctrine appears to be total warfare. They don't take prisoners, they don't honor surrender, and they don't recognize civilian noncombatants. But, Admiral, they've never attacked a medical station before. No one has. It's been the one line that even the most savage species in the galaxy have refused to cross." Kane studied the tactical data, his mind racing through the implications. The Keth Var had approximately 200 ships in their battle fleet, including several dreadnoughts capable of cracking planetary shields. They were not a species that made impulsive decisions. This attack was calculated, deliberate, and designed to send a message to the galaxy about their intentions. "Send a message to all fleet commands," Kane ordered. "Full mobilization, all available ships. And give me a direct line to the Senate Military Committee." The communications officer worked quickly to establish the connection. Within moments, the holographic forms of 12 senators appeared around the command center's conference table, their faces grim as they absorbed the briefing data. Senator Rebecca Hayes, the chairwoman of the Military Committee, spoke first. "Admiral Kane, are we certain about the intelligence? A direct attack on a medical station seems unprecedented." Kane gestured to the tactical display. "Senator, we have confirmed reports from multiple sources. The Keth Var Imperium has violated medical sanctuary laws that have been respected for 3,000 years. They've attacked healers, Senator. beings whose only crime was trying to save lives. Senator Michael Chun, whose daughter served as a medical officer in the outer colonies, leaned forward. Admiral, what are our response options? Kane had been preparing for this question since the distress signal arrived. We have several choices, Senator. We can lodge a formal protest with the Galactic Council and hope for diplomatic resolution. We can impose economic sanctions and try to pressure them through trade restrictions. Or, Senator Hayes prompted. Kane's expression hardened. Or we can show them why attacking human medical personnel is the worst mistake any species can make. The senators exchanged glances. Senator David Park, known for his pacifist leanings, cleared his throat. Admiral, surely military action should be our last resort. The loss of life would be enormous on both sides. With respect, Senator, Kane replied, they crossed the line first. They attacked healers. They violated the most fundamental principle of civilized warfare. If we don't respond decisively, every medical station in human space becomes a target. Every doctor, every nurse, every medical transport becomes fair game for any species that decides our mercy is a weakness to exploit. Senator Hayes studied the tactical data. What would a military response look like? Kane activated a new display showing the deployment of human forces across the galaxy. We have the Third Fleet conducting training exercises in the Wolf system, 4 hours from Kepler 442. The Fifth Fleet is stationed at the Centauri shipyards, 8 hours away. The Seventh Fleet is completing resupply operations at Vega Station, 6 hours from the target. That's 3 full fleets, Senator Chen observed. Over 400 ships. The Kethvar have approximately 200 vessels, Kane confirmed. But that's not the point, Senator. This isn't about matching forces. It's about sending a message that will resonate across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. Senator Park frowned. Admiral, you're talking about potentially annihilating an entire species over a single incident. Kane turned to face the senator directly. Senator, with respect, this is not a single incident. This is an attack on the fundamental principles that keep galactic civilization from collapsing into barbarism. The medical sanctuary laws exist because without them, every conflict becomes a war of extermination. The Kethvar have chosen to tear down a wall that has protected countless billions of beings across the galaxy. The command center's main display shifted to show incoming reports from across human space. Admiral Kane watched as the news of the attack spread through the military networks, and the response was immediate and visceral. Fleet commanders were requesting permission to deploy without waiting for orders. Marine units were volunteering for immediate deployment. Even the typically reserve intelligence corps was requesting authorization for deep strike operations. Admiral, called Commander Martinez from the intelligence station, we're receiving reports from our allies. The Altarian Federation is mobilizing their medical rescue fleets to assist with casualty evacuation. The Crystalline Consortium is offering to share their advanced healing technologies for emergency treatment of the station's survivors. Even species that don't usually involve themselves in human affairs are expressing their outrage. Kane nodded. The attack wasn't just an assault on humanity. It was an attack on the principles that held galactic civilization together. Every species that had ever benefited from medical neutrality understood what was at stake. Senator Hayes made her decision. Admiral Kane, you have authorization for full military response. But I want to be clear, this is not a war of conquest. This is a surgical strike to restore medical sanctuary and ensure this never happens again. Kane straightened. Understood, Senator. We'll make it clear that attacking medical personnel comes with consequences that no species wants to face. The senator's holographic forms faded as the connection ended. Kane turned to his staff, feeling the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. But this was different from previous conflicts. This was personal in a way that surprised him with its intensity. All fleet commands, this is Admiral Kane, he announced over the military networks. Operation Medical Shield is now in effect. All available vessels are to converge on the Kepler 442 system with maximum speed. Rules of engagement are simple. Any vessel that has attacked medical personnel or threatens medical facilities is to be destroyed without warning. The response was immediate. Across human space, warships began breaking orbit and setting course for Kepler 442. The Third Fleet's commander, Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, was already calculating jump coordinates when Kane's message arrived. The Fifth Fleet's Admiral James Wong began recalling his ships from patrol duties and organizing them into a battle formation that could cover the entire system. The Seventh Fleet's Admiral Maria Santos started loading specialized weapons packages designed for close-quarters combat around space stations. But it wasn't just the regular fleet units that were responding. From the secret shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt came vessels that officially didn't exist, black operations ships equipped with weapons that violated 3 different galactic treaties. From the research stations scattered throughout the Outer Rim came ships carrying experimental technologies that had never been tested in actual combat. From the defense platforms guarding the Sol system came the massive fortress ships that usually only moved to counter extinction-level threats. Commander Martinez approached Kane with a tactical update. "Admiral, we're showing unprecedented mobilization rates. Every available ship is responding to the call. Estimated time to full deployment, 18 hours. Kane studied the deployment patterns on his display. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen the human military respond with such coordinated fury. Ships were abandoning patrol routes, cutting short training exercises, and breaking off from supply operations to join the converging fleets. "What's our intelligence on the current situation at the medical station?" he asked. Martinez pulled up the latest sensor readings. Long-range scans suggest the Kethvar are still in control of the facility. The station's shields are down, but life support appears to be functioning. We're detecting approximately 300 Kethvar personnel on board, plus an unknown number of their ships, maintaining position around the station. Kane nodded grimly. The Kethvar were using the medical station as their base of operations, probably assuming that no one would be willing to risk the lives of the medical personnel and patients trapped inside. They were about to discover that their assumption was fatally flawed. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a priority message from Fleet Intelligence. They've managed to establish contact with survivors inside the medical station." Kane hurried to the communications station. The signal was weak and heavily encrypted, but the voice that came through was recognizably human and filled with barely controlled rage. "This is Dr. Sarah Chun, Chief Medical Officer of Medical Station Hippocrates. The Kethvar have seized control of our facility and are holding medical personnel as prisoners. They're forcing us to treat only their wounded while allowing patients from other species to die. They've executed 12 medical staff members as examples. Admiral, they're not just violating medical sanctuary. They're turning healers into weapons of war." Kane closed his eyes, feeling a cold anger settle in his chest. The Kethvar weren't just attacking a medical station. They were perverting everything it represented, forcing healers to choose who lived and who died based on species and politics. "Dr. Chun, this is Admiral Kane. Help is coming. Can you provide any tactical information about their positions?" "Admiral, they have approximately 300 soldiers throughout the station, concentrated mainly in the command center and main medical bays. They're using our patients as human shields, positioning their forces in the critical care units where any weapons fire would endanger civilian lives." Kane absorbed this information, already formulating tactical plans. The Kethvar were clever. They had positioned themselves so that any rescue attempt would risk the lives of the very people the humans were trying to save. "Dr. Chun, can you maintain communications?" "I'll try, Admiral. But, Admiral, they're not just attacking us. They're attacking what we represent. They want to prove that mercy is weakness, that healing is futility. They want to break the spirit of everyone who believes in medical neutrality." "Doctor," Kane replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "they've made one critical error in their calculations." "What's that, Admiral?" "They attacked human medical personnel. And we're about to show the galaxy exactly what happens when someone makes that mistake." The connection ended, leaving Kane staring at the tactical display where hundreds of human warships were converging on a single point in space. Each ship carried crews who understood that they weren't just going to rescue a medical station. They were going to defend a principle that defined the difference between civilization and barbarism. In the depths of space, the human battle fleets continued their approach toward Kepler 442. The Kethvar had expected their attack on the medical station to demonstrate human weakness. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the depths of human space. The fury of a species that had built its identity around protecting those who could not protect themselves. The Kethvar were about to learn that there were lines in the universe that should never be crossed, and that the consequences for crossing them were more terrible than they could possibly imagine. Fleet Admiral Kane looked at his staff, seeing the same cold determination reflected in every face. Gentlemen, ladies, we're not just going to rescue our medical personnel. We're going to send a message that will echo across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. You can fight humans, you can attack our colonies, you can even glass our worlds. But touch those who heal in our name, and we'll show you what real human fury looks like. The countdown to Operation Medical Shield had begun. The Kethvar commander Thrak Vaughn stood in the command center of Medical Station Hippocrates, studying the tactical displays with growing unease. His massive form, nearly 3 meters of muscle and natural armor, dominated the space that had once been used for coordinating medical operations. Around him, his subordinates monitored the sensor readings that showed an impossible sight. The largest human fleet ever assembled was approaching their position. "Commander," reported his tactical officer, "we now count 437 human vessels approaching the system. This includes ships from classifications we've never seen before. Some of them are massive enough to be mobile space stations." Thrakvon's facial plates shifted in what humans might recognize as a frown. The intelligence reports had suggested that humans were weak, that their adherence to medical neutrality and diplomatic solutions made them incapable of decisive military action. The approaching fleet suggested that the intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. "What is the status of our own forces?" he asked. 215 ships holding position around the station, Commander. "But, sir, some of the approaching human vessels are showing energy signatures that exceed our dreadnoughts. Whatever those ships are, they're built for warfare on a scale we haven't encountered before." Thrakvon turned to look at the human medical officer, who had become his unwilling liaison. Dr. Sarah Chun stood with her hands bound behind her back, but her eyes held a defiance that had only grown stronger since the human fleet had been detected. "Your people are making a mistake, human," he growled. "We hold this station and everyone on it. If they attack, thousands of medical personnel will die." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Commander, you clearly don't understand humans very well. You attacked healers. You turned a sanctuary into a weapon. Did you really think we would negotiate after that?" Before Thrakvon could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The lead elements of the human fleet had reached the edge of the system and were deploying into attack formations that defied everything the Kethvar understood about space combat. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Hippocratic Oath, a massive dreadnought that had been rushed to completion specifically for this operation. The ship's name had been chosen deliberately. It was both a promise and a threat, a reminder of the principles that the Kethvar had violated and the consequences they would face. "Fleet status report," Kane ordered. "All fleet elements in position, Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "The Third Fleet has deployed along the system's outer edge to prevent any Kethvar vessels from escaping. The Fifth Fleet is moving into assault positions around the medical station. The Seventh Fleet is maintaining a reserve position with our specialized rescue ships." Kane studied the tactical display, noting how the Kethvar ships had clustered around the medical station in a defensive formation. It was tactically sound. Any attack on their forces would risk damaging the station and killing the very people the humans had come to save. "What's our estimate on casualties if we proceed with a direct assault?" Kane asked. Commander Rodriguez, his tactical specialist, consulted her displays. "Unacceptable losses, Admiral. The Kethvar have positioned their ships so that any weapons fire would likely penetrate the station's hull. With life support systems damaged and the medical staff unable to evacuate patients, we could lose thousands of civilians. Kane nodded. This was exactly what he had expected. The Kethvar were using the medical personnel and patients as human shields, counting on human morality to protect them from retaliation. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kethvar commander." "Put it through." The holographic form of Commander Thrakvon appeared in the center of the bridge, his massive frame and predatory features designed to intimidate. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of a being who believed he held all the advantages. "Human Admiral, I am Commander Thrakvon of the Kethvar Imperium. You will withdraw your fleet immediately, or we will begin executing the medical personnel we hold prisoner." Kane studied the alien commander with the calm expression of a man who had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this moment. "Commander Thrakvon, I am Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Forces. You have attacked a neutral medical facility and violated medical sanctuary laws that have been respected for 3,000 years. You have one opportunity to surrender unconditionally." Thrakvon's laugh was a harsh sound that scraped across the communications channel. "Admiral, you seem to misunderstand the situation. We hold this station and everyone on it. Your moral weakness prevents you from taking action that would endanger the very people you came to save. Withdraw now, or watch as we demonstrate the consequences of opposing the Imperium." Kane's expression didn't change, but everyone on the bridge could feel the temperature seem to drop several degrees. "Commander, you've made one critical error in your calculations. And what is that, human? You assume that because we value the lives of medical personnel, we're incapable of tactical thinking. You're about to discover that humans have had 3,000 years to develop ways of rescuing people from hostage situations." Kane cut the transmission and turned to his tactical team. "Initiate Operation Nightingale." Across the human fleet, ships began deploying technologies that the Kethvar had never encountered. From the specialized vessels of the 7th Fleet came clouds of nanoscale medical drones, so small they could pass through the station's air recycling systems undetected. From the research ships came focused gravitic fields that could selectively disable specific systems without damaging the surrounding structure. From the Black Operations vessels came boarding pods equipped with non-lethal weapons designed for rescue operations in hostile environments. But the centerpiece of Operation Nightingale was something the Kethvar couldn't have anticipated. The humans had spent centuries developing medical technologies that could keep people alive in situations that would kill members of other species. Every human medical officer carried emergency stasis field generators that could suspend biological functions for hours. Every human medical facility was equipped with automated systems that could maintain life support even if the primary systems were destroyed. "Deploy the medical nanodrones," Kane ordered. "Begin selective system disruption of Kethvar equipment. And prepare the rescue teams for emergency insertion." Throughout Medical Station Hippocrates, microscopic drones began infiltrating the air systems. Each drone was programmed with detailed medical data about every species known to serve in galactic medical facilities. When they encountered a Kethvar soldier, they released targeted neurochemical agents that would cause temporary paralysis. When they encountered medical personnel or patients, they released compounds that would enhance their natural resistance to trauma and prepare their systems for emergency evacuation. Commander Thrakvon was studying tactical reports when his soldiers began collapsing throughout the station. The paralysis spread quickly through his forces, leaving them conscious but unable to move or operate their weapons. "What is happening?" he roared, struggling against the growing numbness in his limbs. Dr. Sarah Chun, whose bonds had been dissolved by the same nanodrones that were incapacitating the Kethvar, stood up and brushed off her medical coat. Around her, other human medical personnel were also freeing themselves as their captors fell helpless. "Commander," she said calmly, "you made the mistake of thinking that human medicine is only about healing. You forgot that we're also very good at selective biological warfare. The station shuddered as human boarding pods attached to the hull at precise locations identified by the nanodrones. Teams of human marines, equipped with non-lethal weapons and emergency medical equipment, began cutting through the bulkheads with tools designed to minimize structural damage. On his flagship, Admiral Kane watched the rescue operation unfold with professional satisfaction. Status report on the boarding operations. All teams have breached successfully, Admiral, reported Commander Martinez. The nanodrones have neutralized approximately 90% of the HFY forces. Our medical teams are beginning immediate triage of the station's patients. Kane nodded, but his attention was focused on the HFY fleet surrounding the station. The enemy ships were beginning to react to the loss of communication with their boarding parties, and their weapons were powering up for what would likely be a desperate assault on the station. Fleet Tactical, prepare for Phase 2 of the operation. Aye, Admiral. All ships report ready for selective engagement. Ken had spent weeks planning this moment. The HFY expected the humans to choose between rescuing their medical personnel and protecting the station from destruction. They were about to learn that humans refuse to accept such limitations. Initiate gravitic field deployment around the medical station. Across the human fleet, ships equipped with experimental gravitic technology began generating a protective field around medical station Hippocrates. The field would deflect weapons fire while allowing the passage of rescue ships and personnel. It was technology that had never been tested in actual combat, but the human engineers had been confident it would work. The first HFY ship to fire discovered that its plasma bolts were redirected harmlessly into empty space. The second ship found its missiles turned back toward their own fleet. The third ship's energy beams were absorbed by the field and converted into power for the station's life support systems. Commander Thrakvon, lying paralyzed in the medical station's command center, watched through the external cameras as his fleet's weapons proved useless against the human defensive technology. But his species had not built an empire by accepting defeat easily. All ships, he managed to transmit through his neural implants, ramming speed. Destroy the station through direct impact. The HFY fleet began accelerating toward the medical station, their massive dreadnoughts aimed at the facility that held thousands of medical personnel and patients. It was a final desperate attempt to inflict casualties even in defeat. Admiral Kane watched the enemy fleet's maneuver with cold calculation. All fleet units implement the Hippocrates protocol. The order had been prepared for exactly this situation. Every ship in the human fleet had been equipped with experimental tractor beam arrays designed to work in concert. As the HFY ships approached the medical station, invisible forces reached out to grab them, slowing their advance and pulling them away from their targets. But the tractor beams weren't just stopping the enemy ships. They were redirecting them towards specific coordinates in space where the human fleet's most powerful vessels were waiting. Admiral, reported the tactical officer, all enemy vessels have been successfully captured by our tractor arrays. They're being redirected toward the designated termination zones. Kane nodded grimly. The HFY had chosen their fate when they decided to attack medical personnel. Now, they would face the consequences of that decision. All vessels, you are authorized to engage captured targets with maximum force. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The HFY ships, held motionless by the human tractor beams, were systematically destroyed by weapons that had been designed for this specific purpose. Each human ship carried ordnance that was normally forbidden by galactic law, weapons that could crack the molecular bonds in enemy armor, energy beams that could trigger controlled fusion reactions within enemy power cores, kinetic projectiles that could punch through multiple hulls before exploding. The destruction of the HFY fleet took exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 215 enemy warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and metal fragments. On medical station Hippocrates, Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the command center watching the rescue operations unfold around her. Human medical teams were working alongside the station's original staff to stabilize patients and prepare them for transport to proper medical facilities. The HFY soldiers who had attacked the station were being treated for their paralysis, Because even after everything they had done, the human medical personnel refused to abandon their oath to heal. Commander Thrak Vaughn, still unable to move, but fully conscious, stared at the human doctor who knelt beside him with a medical scanner. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked at him with eyes that held both compassion and an implacable hardness. "Because that's who we are, Commander. We heal the wounded, even when the wounded are those who tried to destroy us. But don't mistake our mercy for weakness." She stood up and looked at the tactical display showing the destruction of his fleet. "You attacked healers, Commander. You violated the most sacred law in the galaxy. What you witnessed today, the complete annihilation of your forces while we rescued every single person on this station. That's what happens when you cross that line." Admiral Kane's voice came over the communication system, addressing everyone on the station. "All medical personnel, all patients, all survivors, this is Admiral Marcus Kane. The immediate threat has been neutralized. The Kethvar fleet has been destroyed, and medical sanctuary has been restored. Emergency transport vessels are standing by to evacuate anyone requiring advanced medical care." Sarah smiled as she heard the cheers echoing through the station's corridors. Around her, beings from dozens of species, doctors, nurses, patients, even the paralyzed Kethvar soldiers, were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. They were seeing what happened when someone was foolish enough to attack human medical personnel. The message would spread across the galaxy within days. Every species would hear the story of Medical Station Hippocrates, where the humans had demonstrated that their commitment to healing came with consequences for those who would pervert it. Never again would any civilization consider attacking medical facilities staffed by humans. The Red Cross had become more than a symbol of healing. It had become a warning that some lines should never be crossed. 3 days after the Battle of Medical Station Hippocrates, Admiral Marcus Kane stood in the war room aboard his flagship, studying intelligence reports that painted a picture of an entire galactic region in upheaval. The destruction of the Kethvar battle fleet had been witnessed by sensor networks across 12 star systems, and the news was spreading faster than any military force could contain it. "Admiral," reported Commander Martinez, entering the room with a stack of communication intercepts, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different Kethvar colony worlds. Their local governors are requesting protection from their own military forces." Kane looked up from the tactical display, where he had been studying the locations of remaining Kethvar installations. "Protection from their own military?" "Yes, sir. According to these intercepts, news of the fleet's destruction has caused a complete breakdown in Kethvar command structure. Colonial governors are declaring independence from the Imperium, and military commanders are fighting each other for control of the remaining ships." Kane absorbed this information, recognizing the signs of an empire in collapse. The Kethvar had built their power on the belief that strength and cruelty were the only currencies that mattered in galactic politics. The complete destruction of their most powerful fleet had shattered that illusion and revealed the fundamental weakness at the heart of their civilization. "What's the status of our medical personnel?" Kane asked. "All station staff have been evacuated and are receiving treatment aboard our hospital ships," Martinez replied. "Dr. Chun has requested permission to return to the station to oversee its reconstruction. She says the facility needs to be operational as soon as possible to demonstrate that medical sanctuary cannot be permanently disrupted." Kane nodded with approval. Dr. Chun had shown remarkable courage throughout the crisis, and her insistence on returning to her post would send exactly the right message to the galaxy. And the Kethvar prisoners? Approximately 300 survivors from the station assault, including their commander. They're being held in medical detention while our doctors treat their paralysis. Dr. Chun has insisted that they receive the same standard of care as any other patients, despite what they did. Kane felt a surge of pride in the human medical personnel. Even after being attacked, brutalized, and used as hostages, they remained true to their oath to heal without regard to species or politics. It was exactly this kind of moral consistency that had made the Kethvar attack so shocking to other civilizations. "Sir," called the communications officer from across the room. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting your immediate presence at an emergency session." Kane had been expecting this call. The complete destruction of a major military fleet, even one that had violated medical sanctuary laws, was the kind of event that demanded political response. The Council would need to decide how to handle the precedent that had been set. "Patch me through to the Council chambers." The holographic display activated, showing the great amphitheater where representatives from 47 different species gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. At the center of the chamber, Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Federation called the session to order. "Admiral Kane." The Chancellor began, his crystalline voice carrying across the transmission. "The Council has convened to discuss the recent events at Medical Station Hippocrates. While we understand that the Kethvar violated fundamental laws regarding medical neutrality, the scale of your response has raised concerns among several member species." Kane had prepared for this moment. "Chancellor, members of the Council, the Kethvar Imperium committed an act that strikes at the foundation of galactic civilization. They attacked healers, violated medical sanctuary, and used medical personnel as hostages. Our response was proportional to the threat they posed to the principle of medical neutrality." A figure rose from the Council floor. Ambassador Threx of the Hegemony Coalition, a species known for their cautious approach to military conflict. "Admiral, while the Kethvar actions were deplorable, the complete annihilation of their battle fleet seems excessive. Could not diplomatic solutions have been pursued?" Kane felt the familiar weight of command, responsibility, settling on his shoulders. This was the moment when humanity's place in the galactic community would be defined for generations to come. "Ambassador Threx, with respect, the Kethvar had already rejected diplomatic solutions when they chose to attack a medical station. They used healers as weapons, forced medical personnel to choose who lived and died based on species loyalty, and executed 12 doctors and nurses as examples. There could be no negotiation with beings who had crossed that line." Another figure stood, Counselor Yalthara of the Peaceful Path Alliance, a species that had achieved interstellar travel without ever developing weapons of war. "Admiral Kane, we understand your anger, but does not the complete destruction of their fleet represent the same kind of excessive force that we condemn in the Kethvar?" Kane looked directly at the Peaceful Path representative. "Counselor, the human response was precise and targeted. We destroyed military vessels that had participated in the attack on medical facilities. We rescued every single medical staff member and patient from the station. We provided medical treatment to the Kethvar soldiers who had attacked our healers. The only beings who died were those who had chosen to violate the most fundamental law of civilized warfare." Chancellor Vex consulted his notes before speaking again. "Admiral, the Council has received reports that human forces used weapons and technologies that may violate existing treaties regarding warfare in space. Can you address these concerns?" Kane had expected this question as well. "Chancellor, the technologies we employed were specifically designed for rescue operations and the protection of medical facilities. The gravitic fields that protected the station from weapons fire, the nanoscale medical drones that neutralized enemy personnel without causing permanent harm, the tractor beam arrays that prevented ramming attacks. All of these systems were developed for defensive purposes. And the weapons that destroyed the Kethvar fleet," pressed Ambassador Threx, "were employed only after the enemy had demonstrated their intention to destroy the medical station and everyone aboard it through ramming attacks," Kane replied. "At that point, they were no longer seeking to hold hostages. They were attempting mass murder of medical personnel and patients." A new voice entered the debate. Sage Mordun of the Ancient Archive, a being whose species was among the first to achieve interstellar travel and whose words carried enormous weight in council deliberations. "Admiral Kane." The sage's voice resonated with authority accumulated over millennia. "In 3,000 years of recorded galactic history, no species has ever attempted what the Kethvar did. The attack on medical sanctuary represents a fundamental challenge to the principles that have allowed diverse civilizations to coexist in space. Your response, while severe, has reaffirmed the sanctity of those principles. Kane felt a wave of relief as one of the galaxy's most respected voices supported the human action. Sage Mordun continued, "However, the Council must consider the precedent that has been set. If one species can unilaterally destroy an entire military fleet in response to treaty violations, what prevents other conflict from escalating to similar levels?" Kane straightened, recognizing this as the crucial moment of the entire proceedings. "Sage Mordun, members of the Council, humanity accepts the responsibility that comes with our actions. We propose the establishment of the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force, a joint military command specifically tasked with defending medical facilities and personnel throughout the galaxy." The suggestion caused a stir throughout the council chamber. Several representatives began conferring with their advisors, while others called for clarification of the proposal. Chancellor Vex raised his hand for order. "Admiral Kane, are you suggesting that humanity is willing to serve as guardians for all medical facilities in galactic space?" "Not just humanity, Chancellor. We propose a joint force with representatives from all willing species, operating under Council oversight, with a specific mandate to protect medical neutrality. Any attack on medical facilities would be met with immediate and overwhelming response from this force." Ambassador Threx leaned forward. "And who would command this force?" Kane had anticipated this question as well. Command would rotate among participating species, with oversight from the Council. The goal is not human dominance, but the protection of principles that transcend any single species' interests. For several minutes, the council chamber buzzed with discussion as representatives considered the proposal. Kane waited patiently, knowing that the decision made here would determine whether the galaxy moved toward greater cooperation or descended into the kind of anarchic violence that the Kethvar had tried to introduce. Finally, Sage Mordun spoke again. "Admiral Kane, the Ancient Archive supports this proposal. The protection of medical neutrality is indeed a responsibility that all civilized species must share." One by one, other representatives began voicing their support. The Altarian Federation pledged their fastest ships for medical evacuation duties. The Crystalline Consortium offered their advanced medical technologies for emergency treatment. Even the traditionally neutral Ethereal Collective agreed to provide their unique abilities for communication across vast distances. Chancellor Vex called for a formal vote, all in favor of establishing the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force under Joint Galactic Command. The result was overwhelming. 43 species voted in favor, with only 2 abstentions and no opposition. "The measure passes," Chancellor Vex announced. "Admiral Kane, the Council thanks humanity for proposing this solution and for demonstrating the importance of protecting those who heal." As the council session ended, Kane felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The attack on Medical Station Hippocrates had been a tragedy, but from that tragedy had emerged something unprecedented, a formal commitment by the galactic community to protect medical neutrality with military force. His communicator chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Sarah Chun aboard the reconstructed medical station. Her face appeared on the small screen, and Kane was pleased to see that she looked healthy and determined despite her recent ordeal. "Admiral Kane," she said, "I wanted to thank you personally for what you and your fleet did for us. But more than that, I wanted you to know that we've received applications from over 200 medical personnel who want to serve aboard Hippocrates. Beings from dozens of species who heard what happened and want to be part of a facility that has become a symbol of protected neutrality." Kane smiled. "Doctor, you and your staff showed tremendous courage throughout this crisis. The galaxy has taken note of that courage. Admiral, there's something else. The Kethvar prisoners have been asking to speak with you. Their commander, Thrakvon, says he has something important to communicate." Kane considered this request. "Very well, Doctor. Patch him through." The screen shifted to show the Kethvar commander, still recovering from his paralysis, but now able to sit upright. His massive form looked somehow diminished, and his eyes held an expression that Kane had never seen in a Kethvar before. something that might have been humility. "Admiral Kane," Thrakvon said, his voice much quieter than during their previous encounter, "I have watched your medical staff treat my soldiers with the same care they show their own people. I have seen beings from dozens of species working together to heal rather than harm. I do not understand this behavior, but I recognize its power." Kane waited for the commander to continue. "The Imperium taught us that strength comes from domination, that mercy is weakness, that the strong must rule the weak. But your response to our attack has shown us something different. You were stronger than us not because you were more cruel, but because you were more principled." Thrakvon paused, seeming to struggle with concepts that had no place in Kethvar philosophy. "Admiral, I formally surrender the remaining forces of the Kethvar Imperium to the authority of the Galactic Council. We wish to learn this different way of being strong." Kane studied the alien commander, seeing genuine transformation in his expression. "Commander, surrender is just the beginning. True strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves, from building rather than destroying, from healing rather than harming. It's a difficult path, but one that leads to something greater than empire. Will you help us learn this path, Admiral?" Kane looked at the Kethvar commander and felt a familiar sense of hope. "Commander, that's what the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force is for, to show the galaxy that there's a better way to be strong." As the communication ended, Kane reflected on the events of the past week. The attack on Medical Station Hippocrates had been intended to demonstrate that medical neutrality was a weakness that could be exploited. Instead, it had proven that some principles were worth defending with overwhelming force, and that true strength came from protecting those who healed rather than those who harmed. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would resonate for centuries. You could attack human colonies, destroy human ships, even challenge human territory. But if you attacked those who wore the Red Cross, you would face the full fury of a species that had built its identity around protecting healers. And now, with the establishment of the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force, that protection would extend to medical personnel from every species in the galaxy. The Red Cross had become more than a human symbol. It was now a galactic promise that those who chose to heal would never stand alone against those who chose to harm. 6 months after the Battle of Medical Station Hippocrates, Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Medical Command Center, watching as ships from 47 different species arrive for the formal inauguration of the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force. The facility, built in orbit around the Garden World where the original medical station had operated, was 3 times larger than its predecessor and designed to serve as both a medical facility and the headquarters for the galaxy's first joint military force dedicated to protecting healers. The view was spectacular. Sleek Altarian medical frigates with their distinctive crystalline hulls moved in formation alongside the massive human hospital ships that could treat thousands of patients simultaneously. Ethereal collective vessels, appearing as shifting patterns of pure energy, danced between the more traditional spacecraft in displays of welcome that transcended language barriers. Even the rebuilt ships of the former Kethvar Imperium, now flying under Council authority and crewed by beings learning new concepts of strength through service, took their place in the growing fleet. "Dr. Chun," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Marcus Kane approaching, wearing the new uniform of the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force, a design that incorporated symbols from every member species while maintaining the prominent Red Cross that had become the universal sign of protected medical neutrality. "Admiral Kane," she replied with a warm smile. "Or should I say, Fleet Admiral Kane? Congratulations on your promotion." Kane returned the smile, but shook his head. "The promotion comes with a heavy responsibility, Doctor. Leading a joint force with representatives from dozens of species, each with their own military traditions and cultural values, is proving to be quite a challenge." Sarah looked out at the assembled fleet. "But look what we've accomplished together. 6 months ago, the Kethvar attack nearly shattered the principle of medical neutrality. Today, we have the strongest protection for medical facilities in galactic history." Kane joined her at the observation window, watching as the final ships took their positions for the formal ceremony. "Doctor," there's something I need to discuss with you. We've been receiving intelligence reports about potential threats to medical facilities in the Outer Rim. Species that may have interpreted the HFY defeat as a sign that they need to be more careful in their attacks, rather than abandoning them altogether. Sarah's expression grew serious. What kind of threats? Pirate organizations that are specifically targeting medical transports, believing they carry valuable pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. Rogue states that are questioning whether the Protection Force will respond to attacks on facilities that treat their enemies. Even some legitimate governments that are wondering if medical neutrality applies when their own species aren't represented in the patient population. Kane pulled up a holographic display showing incidents across the galaxy. 3 medical transports attacked in the past month. 2 medical stations that have reported being visited by military vessels demanding to inspect their patient lists, and 1 planetary hospital that was threatened with bombardment if they continued treating refugees from a neighboring system's civil war. Sarah studied the data with growing concern. Admiral, it sounds like some beings learned the wrong lesson for what happened to the HFY. Exactly. They think the key is to be more subtle, to attack medical facilities in ways that can be explained as accidents or legitimate military actions. They don't understand that the principle we're protecting is absolute. Medical neutrality isn't conditional on politics or convenience. Sarah turned back to the window where the ceremony was about to begin. Beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness the formal establishment of the Protection Force, and representatives from every major civilization were present to add their support to the principle of medical sanctuary. Admiral, what do you think it will take to make them understand? Kane was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I think, Doctor, it will take a demonstration that we meant every word of our commitment. Someone, somewhere is going to test us. And when they do, we need to be ready to show the galaxy that the Protection Force isn't just a symbolic gesture. It's a promise backed by overwhelming force. As if summoned by his words, Kane's communication device chimed with an urgent message. He activated the display to reveal the face of Commander Martinez, now serving as his intelligence chief for the Protection Force. Admiral, we're receiving a distress call from Medical Transport Mercy's wing, operating in the Vega periphery. They report being pursued by unidentified vessels and request immediate assistance. Kane's expression hardened. How many patients aboard the transport? 237, sir. Mixed species, including civilian refugees from the conflict in the Deneb system. And the pursuing vessels? Unknown configuration, but sensor readings suggest at least 6 ships in attack formation. Kane looked at Sarah, seeing the same determination in her eyes that had sustained her through the original attack on Medical Station Hippocrates. Doctor, it looks like we're about to find out how effective our new Protection Force really is. Kane activated his command communicator, addressing the assembled fleet. All Protection Force vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Kane. We have received a distress call from a medical transport under attack. This is exactly the situation we were created to address. All ships, prepare for immediate deployment to the Vega periphery. The response was immediate. Across the assembled fleet, vessels from dozens of species began powering up their engines and weapon systems. But this wasn't the desperate response that had characterized the original rescue of Medical Station Hippocrates. This was the coordinated action of a joint military force that had spent 6 months training for exactly this scenario. Admiral, came a new voice over the communication system. It was Captain Thrakvon, the former HFY commander who now commanded one of the Protection Force's rapid response vessels. The former Imperium forces request permission to lead the assault. We have experience with the kind of beings who would attack medical transports, and we know how they think. Kane considered the request. Thrakvon and his crew had undergone extensive rehabilitation and retraining, learning to channel their natural aggression toward protecting rather than conquering. This would be their first major test as members of the galactic community. Permission granted, Captain. But remember, our goal is to protect the medical transport and its patients, not to seek revenge. Understood, Admiral. We have learned much about true strength in the past months. The Protection Force fleet departed with a precision that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Ships from 47 different species moved in coordinated formations, their different technologies and capabilities integrated into a unified response that maximized their collective effectiveness. Sarah watched from the command center as the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying beings who had once been enemies toward a common goal of protecting medical neutrality. The transformation was remarkable. Species that had fought wars against each other were now working together to defend the principle that healing transcended politics. Doctor called one of her staff members. We're receiving real-time updates from the fleet. They've reached the Vega periphery and have located the medical transport. Sarah hurried to the tactical display, where the situation was unfolding in real time. The medical transport Mercy's Wing was a large vessel designed to carry patients across interstellar distances while providing them with continuous medical care. It was currently being pursued by 6 unmarked warships whose configuration suggested they were pirates operating outside the authority of any legitimate government. Fleet Admiral Kane, to all vessels, came a transmission from the lead ship. The medical transport is holding position behind an asteroid field, using the rocks as cover. The attacking vessels have surrounded their position and are demanding surrender. Captain Thrakvon's voice responded, Admiral, my sensors indicate the attacking vessels are equipped with boarding equipment. They intend to capture the transport and its patients, probably for ransom or slave trading. Kane's reply was cold and precise. All Protection Force vessels, you are authorized to engage the attacking ships with extreme prejudice. Medical Transport Mercy's Wing is under the protection of galactic law, and any attack on its crew or patients constitutes a violation of medical sanctuary. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The 6 pirate vessels found themselves facing 47 warships, representing the combined military might of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Their weapons, designed for terrorizing merchant vessels and civilian transports, proved utterly inadequate against ships that had been specifically equipped for protecting medical facilities. The engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, 5 of the pirate ships had been completely destroyed, and the 6th had been captured with its crew in custody for questioning. Medical Transport Mercy's Wing emerged from the asteroid field unharmed, its patients and medical crew safe under the protection of the galaxy's newest military force. Dr. Chun, came Kane's voice over the communication system. The medical transport is requesting permission to dock with our facility for patient transfer and crew rest. Their captain wants to express his gratitude personally. Sarah smiled as she authorized the docking request. Admiral, tell the captain that he and his crew are welcome here. And, Admiral, congratulations on the Protection Force's first successful mission. When the fleet returned to Medical Command Center, Sarah was waiting in the docking bay to greet the crew of Medical Transport Mercy's Wing. The ship's captain, a crystalline being named Zertich, approached her with the characteristic chiming sounds that indicated emotional gratitude in her species. Dr. Chun, Zertich said, her crystalline form reflecting the lights of the docking bay in patterns of appreciation. My crew and I have served in medical transports for over 20 years. We have been attacked before, but we never imagined that help would come so quickly or so decisively. Sarah nodded, understanding the significance of the moment. Captain Zertich, this is what medical sanctuary means in the new galaxy. No one who serves the cause of healing will ever stand alone against those who would harm them. Over the following hours, Sarah met with the patients who had been aboard the transport, refugees from the Deneb conflict who represented 12 different species and a wide range of medical conditions. They had been traveling to a specialized treatment facility when the pirates attacked, and their gratitude for the rescue was expressed in dozens of different ways depending on their species and culture. But it was a conversation with one of the youngest patients that stayed with Sarah long after the excitement of the rescue had faded. A human child named Emma, traveling with her Altarian adoptive parents for treatment of a rare genetic condition, approached Sarah in a medical bay with a question that cut to the heart of everything they were trying to accomplish. "Dr. Chen," Emma asked, "why did those bad people want to hurt us?" "We were just trying to get medical help." Sarah knelt down to the child's level, searching for words that could explain the complexity of galactic politics to someone so young. "Emma, there are some people in the galaxy who don't understand that helping others is the most important thing we can do. They think that being strong means hurting people instead of protecting them. But the nice captain with the scary voice made the bad people go away," Emma said, referring to Captain Thrakvon, whose species' natural appearance could be intimidating despite his reformed nature. "That's right," Sarah replied. "Captain Thrakvon learned that real strength comes from protecting people who need help, especially people who are sick or hurt." Emma considered this for a moment. "So the scary-looking people are actually the good guys now?" Sarah smiled. "The best people, Emma, are the ones who choose to help others, no matter what they look like or where they come from." As Sarah left the medical bay that evening, she reflected on the profound changes that had occurred since the attack on Medical Station Hippocrates. The galaxy had learned that medical neutrality was not a suggestion to be ignored when convenient, but a fundamental principle that would be defended with overwhelming force. More importantly, species that had been enemies were learning to work together in service of something greater than their individual interests. The former HFY warriors were becoming protectors of the very principles they had once tried to destroy. Pirates who had targeted medical facilities were discovering that such attacks brought swift and decisive retaliation from a united galactic community. Admiral Kane joined her in the observation deck as the last of the visiting ships prepared to return to their home systems. The formal inauguration ceremony had been a success, but the real test had come with their response to the attack on Medical Transport Mercy's wing. Dr. Kane said, "We've received communications from 17 different systems requesting Protection Force patrols for their medical facilities. The word is spreading quickly. Medical Sanctuary is no longer just a hope. It's a guarantee." Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that in the darkness between worlds, medical transports were moving safely under the protection of the joint fleet they had helped create. "Admiral, do you think we've really changed things? Have we made the galaxy a safer place for healers?" Kane was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Doctor, I think we've done something even more important than that. We've shown the galaxy that cooperation is stronger than conquest, that protecting healers makes everyone safer, and that the principles we stand for are worth defending with our lives." Sarah nodded, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. The attack on Medical Station Hippocrates had been intended to demonstrate that medical neutrality was a weakness to be exploited. Instead, it had become the foundation for the strongest alliance in galactic history, an alliance built not on shared enemies or mutual fear, but on the shared commitment to protect those who chose to heal. The Red Cross had become more than a symbol of medical neutrality. It had become a promise that in a galaxy full of dangers, there would always be beings willing to risk everything to protect those who dedicated their lives to saving others. And in the years to come, as the Medical Sanctuary Protection Force grew stronger and more united, that promise would transform the galaxy in ways that no one could have imagined. Species that had never cooperated would learn to work together in service of healing. Warriors would discover that their greatest strength came not from conquest, but from protection. And beings across the galaxy would sleep safer knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the Red Cross was watching over those who chose to make the universe a more compassionate place. The message that had begun with the destruction of a HFY fleet would echo across the stars for generations. You could challenge human military might. You could oppose human expansion. You could even make war on human colonies. But if you attacked those who wore the Red Cross, you would face not just human fury, but the combined wrath of every species that had chosen civilization over barbarism. The galaxy had learned, and it would not forget.